Well, I think I'm just an ordinary, simple bloke that followed his heart and his passion and his interests, with great passion.
Hi everyone, and welcome back to Liminal Space. Today I'm in conversation with Jon Muir. Jon is one of Australia's and the world's most regarded explorers and mountaineers. He was the first Australian to reach the summit of Mt Everest alone without the assistance of Sherpas. He's walked to both the North and South Poles, and perhaps his greatest achievement was walking alone across Australia, covering 2,500 kilometres in 128 days, travelling through the driest of Australian deserts with only his dog Seraphine for company, totally reliant on the landscape around him for his food, shelter and ultimate survival. Jon also filmed this journey, released as a documentary titled Alone Across Australia. Jon was awarded the Order of Australia Medal in 1989 for his service to mountaineering and is a recipient of 2 Australian Geographic Awards, including Lifetime of Adventure Award in 2017. Today, Jon lives totally off the grid on a sustainable property with his wife, Suzy, who is also quite the adventurer, and together they are featured in a documentary called Suzy and the Simple Man. So it's a great pleasure to be able to welcome the most extreme simple man to a liminal space. Hi, Jon.
G'day there.
We're on. How are you?
Good, yeah, I'm real good. At home, my favourite place in the world.
And I can see you've got over your right shoulder the poster for Alone Across Australia. I've watched that film half a dozen times, probably more, over the last few years. And it's been a pleasure the last couple of days to discover more about your work and your life. I read with interest that as a kid, you loved the book Robinson Crusoe, and I imagine that this spirit of adventure was always with you. So can you talk about sort of what was it in your childhood that made you think that a life of exploration and adventure wasn't just an idea, but something you could commit your life to?
You look, I think I grew up in an industrial city of Wollongong. We were right on the edge of suburbia, and which also meant we were right on the edge of a sort of 50-50 farmland wilderness. And so we spent all our childhood in the wild. And we were wild kids. We just had an enormous amount of freedom. We'd just head out and do our thing, and we'd get cut and broken and scratched and bloodied, but have a wild time. And we'd come home and it was all, part of being a kid. So I think just that, and when we made weapons and toys and cubby houses and did all that stuff, but I was seriously into it. And I guess just that idea of playing in the bush, it was a lot of freedom. And then, of course, you'd go to school, and it was the opposite of that freedom I enjoyed in my away from school. And after school, we'd always go out in the wild and play, and then the same on the weekends. And that's just what you did. But what happened? The interesting thing that happened at that time, and this childhood is, I was born in 61, so I'm talking about the sort of mid 60s through the 70s. I left school in 77. But what happened in that time in Australia, or certainly where I lived, is that in the late 60s, particularly in the early 70s, television came into people's houses. Television, and people were taken away from being wild to sitting in front of boxes like I'm doing right now, which is not my natural habitat. At school, what I noticed was the kids would not talk about what they did. What did you do after school yesterday? Or what did you do on the weekend? The kids increasingly didn't talk about what they did. They talked about what they watched. And so they almost had removed themselves from their own lives and put themselves into the lives of others completely and utterly, and fictitious characters mostly on television. So it was so many steps removed from the real world that it was ridiculous. But I had a look at some television shows, and I enjoyed watching a few movies and documentaries and whatever. But we had a television on and off, broke down. We didn't have one for a number of years, and then we got another one, but it just didn't hold me. It was not like the bush. So I guess I never gave it up. I never gave up that wildness. And I started looking at careers and thinking, well, what do I want to do? And everything kind of was. And the school itself, the whole system was starting to push kids into boxes. You've got to be, our headmaster got up and said, you've got to be realistic in your choice of career. And I'm going, but I want to, and I'd just seen this documentary about climbing Mount Everest, and I decided I was going to be a mountain climber. I'm 14. And I'm thinking, well, why? What's not unrealistic about that? There's guys out there doing it. I saw them on the documentary. One of the climbers wrote a book about it. Other climbers made the documentary. I watched about it. And some of the climbers on that team were mountain guides. I thought, well, I could be one of those. So that was it for me. I just pursued that and ran with it. And I knew that's what I wanted to do. It wasn't just people were saying, parents, teachers were saying, you'll get over this. You're 14. You want to be a mountain climber. When you were 10, you wanted to be a fire engine driver or whatever. But I knew in my heart that wasn't the case, and that really I wanted to spend my career and my time in wild places.
And so you did it. You reached the summit of Everest. My understanding is you're the first Australian to reach the summit without the aid of Sherpas. Was that sort of like this feeling of achieving a dream in a sense?
It was. Everest was the boyhood dream, and it was important in that sense. And it was, at the time, the mountain had less than 100 ascents. And now, at peak season, hundreds will climb it every day, but it had less than 100 ascents since Tenzing and Hillary made the first ascent. So it was a very different sort of endeavour up until the advent of commercial guiding in the 1990s. So it was very different. But I already knew by the time I summited Everest, yes, alone, as part of a bigger expedition, but I reached the summit alone. That it was some of the climbs I'd done before Everest were far more difficult. And I already knew that Everest was it's a fairly nondescript lump of a mountain. It's not steep. It's low angled. Okay, the air's thin up there, but and it's a bit cold and windy. But it's nothing like being on the side of some sheer wall in the Himalaya, for example. Trying to get you out of that. So Everest was good as the culmination of my boyhood dream. But before I even went there, I realised that I'd already gone beyond that, so to speak.
Yeah, and this idea that you said less than 100 people had reached the summit when you were there, and now 100 people a day. What is it about human nature or about humans that we will? You've taken the road less travelled, but it seems that, most people, even in climbing of Everest, will take that path, that determined path. What is it? Is it a bragging right? Is it a trophy? Is it sort of the thing that people are expected to do? What makes you sort of do these solo and extreme when most even adventurers are taking this path?
Yeah, look, I think it's the difference between the cutting edge of adventure, world adventure, and adventure tourism. Yeah, and so most of these adventures we embark upon classically go through 3 stages. There's the age of exploration, and then the age of adventure, and then there's the age of tourism. Yeah, and so you can look at whatever, space or ocean sailing. The age of exploration was hundreds of years ago, 500, 400, Magellan circled the world 500 years ago now. And so the age of exploration lasted for a few hundred years after that. And then all the oceans had been sailed and more or less mapped. But then the age of adventure followed after that. And then the age of tourism with people crossing oceans on ocean liners and so on. So it's the same with mountaineering. Of course, the adventure tourist can only go where the way is well prepared, and the Sherpas do that on Everest. So for the serious mountaineer, they won't be going to Mount Everest these days. It's almost a laughing stock. It's the biggest joke in world adventure, in fact.
Is it really?
So for adventure tourists, yeah, among serious adventurers, of course, the adventure tourists, for them, it is the ultimate. And they'll come back with stories of how extreme it was, and it was just the hardest thing that anyone could ever possibly do. And for them, that's their reality. That's true. They're not telling a lie. That's their reality. Whereas the seriously experienced mountaineer will be doing something that makes Everest look like the difference between, a 3-year-old circling around on their tricycle on the back patio to Wayne Gardner winning the motorcycle 500cc championship 5 times in a row. The difference is that big.
Yeah. And you mentioned space. Do you have, is it like this globe is becoming discovered, pretty much every inch of it? Where do you still sort of have this idea of exploration and for a world that's mostly explored already, where do your dreams take you in the future for explorations?
Yeah, look, I did mention space, but really, I think the big adventure facing humanity is going forward in creating a sustainable world. And currently, we're so far out of whack with that we'll be facing a catastrophic collapse in the decades ahead, or certainly by the end of the century, if we don't change our tack very quickly. History is littered with collapsing civilizations, and it's worth studying. And when you look at those past civilizations and how they've gotten to a point, and we're talking big civilizations, the Egyptians, whatever, you name it, the Romans, the Mayans, the people that built Angkor Wat, they must have felt all powerful and hard to believe that it could suddenly just all go pear-shaped. And I feel like that's where we're at now. People feel like we're so strong and technology will solve all our problems and all these things that they like to think will happen. But have a look at history and how things have unfolded in the past, and have a look around the world at the way things are going. So, no, look, my adventure now is focused more on how to live in a more balanced way with cut down the resource use. And we're constantly cutting that down in lots of different ways. It's not just about energy or food or whatever. It's actually trying to they say reduce your impact, but just reuse things, remake things. Do we really need that? Can we use what's lying around? Just in every way you look at it, there are better ways of doing things than just going and buying new things. We're such a desperately throwaway society, and what we're really throwing away is the future of life on Earth. And we're a plague. We're the worst. We're the worst thing that's happened to this planet in 60 million years since it was hit by that asteroid that wiped out the dinosaurs. Homo sapien is the worst thing that's happened on this planet since then. Just ask the dodo. Just ask, that myriad of life out there that is so under the pump that it's just collapsing. Whole ecosystems are collapsing. Species going extinct. But your average person, they just want to. They're just on their feed, stuck glued to their machine. The real world out there is just this sort of imaginary space that doesn't have much impact on them. So I see that is the adventure. That is the challenge. And I sometimes look back on the resource, the flagrant use of resource I've made in the past and go, oh, really, I did that. But anyway, now I'm more interested in growing potatoes. But I've been on this path for quite a number of decades now, in fact.
Yeah, that's been the most fascinating thing for me, is to discover your sort of last 15 or 20 years in coming back to the land, and I read that you had realised that you had become able to live and survive in the most extreme places around the world, but you didn't know potentially how to grow a potato in your own backyard. And is that sort of the idea that pushed you to this, because you now live off the grid in a mostly sustainable life?
Yeah, look, it's the adventures definitely played a big part in the journey, of course, and what led me to where I am now. And I left school at 16 to become a professional mountain guide, and things became quite simple in a lot of ways. I lived in this classic sort of suburban house on the edge of suburbia in 60s and 70s Australia. And then I was out on the loose doing odd jobs, fruit picking, whatever, and then going climbing mountains and rock climbing. And lived at Mount Everest in the campground for 6 years. And so things were stripped down. All the superfluous stuff of our society was gone. We just lived camped in our tents or under tarpaulins, and things were very simple. And then I started going mountaineering, and I went to the Himalaya, and I saw these people, these villages in the Himalaya in India and Nepal and Tibet, and they were what we would describe as poor, but I saw these incredibly wealthy people. They had this rich cultural and spiritual life and family life as well, where the whole family was all more or less together, and the grandmothers were with the grandchildren constantly, and all in it together. And sure, they had a very physically challenging life, but that's what we're made to do. We're Homo sapien. We're not Homo slobolis. We're not couch potato man. That's maybe what we've become briefly, but it's no way to live a life. So I saw these people in these journeys that were happy, that were happy with what they were doing. And what were they doing? They were living as subsistence farmers and tending their crops and their stock and their chickens or whatever, and producing their own food and living in relative harmony with their environment. And I just thought, wow, I've got to go there. I've got to do that. It wasn't about going and seeing how these people do it. They were just incidental on my way into climb these mountains. But I knew then that really I wanted to begin to learn the true art of survival, which is taking care of your needs. And people get this needs and wants confused in our society, and I cringe at what I hear is needs and what we accept as our needs. So I was interested in taking care, being more responsible for my true needs, which is water, food, shelter. Yeah. And that's I feel like that's what we all need to be doing. And I think this COVID crisis has highlighted the vulnerability of our society to many people, and we really need to have a greater personal involvement with those needs. Just all of us, and virtually all of us can. Get closer in touch with our needs.
Well, I mean, if for anyone that listens and hears your words, can't help but be inspired to think about things as well. I love this phrase that you said, the art of survival. And if I had have thought that you would mention that sentence, I would have sworn that it would have been you mountain climbing and being on top of the world and walking alone across Australia. But it's amazing that you sort of, you brought the art of survival down to just, the everyday living and shelter and these things that we need. It's absolutely fascinating. Do you mind though if I take you back to these days of exploration and adventure? And the thing that I'm most fascinated with that I don't think gets discussed enough, we really have an insight into physical strength and physical training. But I'm totally fascinated about your mental ability, endurance and training on your expeditions, and particularly, or also this idea of the fact that you've done a lot of these alone and in isolation. Can you talk about the mental strength that you have and how you develop that?
Yeah, look, I think it's the most important aspect of any human endeavour is actually the psychology that you bring to it, the mental side of things. And if that endeavour is a physical endeavour, like climbing a mountain, going on an expedition, people think that it's all about how fit they are, how strong they are, and I saw it so many times at guiding expeditions where people, the young men in particular, were all honed and fit, and there was ultra marathon runs, you name it, just all these, and at the start of a month-long expedition, they'd be out of the blocks as we marched into the mountain, and off they'd go. I thought it was a race, and there would be middle-aged people and even people in their 50s. Some people might be a bit overweight or obviously not super fit or anything, and it was always amusing to me too. And I tried to get the young bucks to slow down. It's not a race, we're in the long haul, but they didn't get that. They thought it was all about the physical side of things, and it was. Yeah, it was amusing to watch things play out, because just as a generalisation, the people who were slower at the beginning, generally the older people ended up being the ones on top of the mountains. The young bucks fell aside, and so they brought the wrong psychology to it, and it's hard to get that through a book or even through a short life. And when I say short life, I mean the life of a young person is a short life. It is something that you do develop over time. And I think it largely also boils down to why are you there? Why are you doing what you're doing? Yeah. And you've got to ask yourself these questions and answer, at least to yourself, those questions honestly. What am I doing here? Why do I want to climb this mountain? Or why do I want to start this business? Why am I, what is it really about? Where's that coming from? And so, having this big dialogue within, an honest, open dialogue within about your motivations is key, I believe. And that's played out so many times again on expeditions where I've been on a private trip with people and we haven't achieved our objective, and some of them have said, "Oh, well, that was a waste of time," or they've come away despondent, depressed, defeated, even. So their attitude was that they were there to climb a mountain, and of course that's why they were there. That's the objective of a mountaineering expedition, to climb the mountain, but it's not the essence of it. After all, when you're climbing a mountain, you reach something. You're only there for 5 minutes, half an hour, whatever it might be. You might spend months on a big Himalayan climb on this expedition. Is that really what it's all about? For that, is that really the goal, to get to the top of the mountain? Yeah. Look, it is. But how important is the goal? And so I just see the goal as the cherry on top of the cake, and I'm much more interested in the cake. The cake has got so much more to offer than that moment on top. And so that's bringing the attitude into the equation. And so if you've got the attitude that that's the climbing the mountain is the objective, but it's not the essence, then you're going to be more resilient and more accepting and calmer when things don't go so well. And that teaches you on the climbing trips that patience and also resilience and making the right calls. I've seen a lot of people die in the course of my career, and if there's one thing I feel that they had in common, it was the wrong psychology. Yeah, like it was more than anything, they got the psychology wrong, their own psychology, and I feel it's because of a lack of introspection or honesty with themselves as to why they were there, and ego often gets in the way there.
What is your cake? What is your essence?
It's the experience. It's the experience of being in the wild, and okay, a lot of the adventures have been very extreme, but it's just the moment by moment that extremity is what I'm after. So the more extreme things became, the more I was in tune with everything around me, and whether it's an extreme blizzard on the polar plateau or just in desperate need of water in the Australian desert. That intensity of experience is what I was really after, and that brings me back to my roots, and all of our roots are as these nomadic hunter-gatherers. And what do the men do in the nomadic hunter-gatherer clan? Well, they work cooperatively, not in competition. They work cooperatively. They go out as a cooperative unit and they would push themselves to their physical limits often in the course of the hunt. And maybe they're hunting a mammoth, or there's other danger. They might be hunting something more tame, but there's dangers around. So they're pushing themselves physically to their limits. They're facing great danger and risk, and working cooperatively. And that's what we've evolved to do. And when you can come close to that, I see the big expeditions. You're out with your crew hunting the mammoth, and it's the whole experience that is fulfilling, not just one little moment of it when things happen to go well for you, or you get home and you've done. In fact, I get home from a long trip and I'm usually just a little bit empty, and whether the trip's been reached its objective or not, that's absolutely irrelevant. It's that I've been out hunting the mammoth, and it has really filled me with the primal humanity that is within us all. And now I'm back at home, and look, I love my home, I really do, but there is that intensity out there that's invigorating, and it's also very addictive, I think.
Yeah, this word essence is a beautiful word, because I see just the passion that you're speaking with now. You're never going to lose this explorative part of you. It's obvious, it's deep in your DNA, obviously. Do you need to do mental training to ready yourself for these extreme experiences, so you're not experiencing them for the first time in some sense? And what, like meditations or any sort of, can you talk through how you deal with your own mind?
Yeah, look, I think you do. I do a lot of training for mental training, if you will, before a big trip, and it is about bringing the right me to the equation, and it is about being calm, and not getting flustered when things don't go right, and so trying to bring that into your day-to-day life. Meditation will help with that. Trying to keep things in perspective. So I guess, in a sense, that the physical and the mental training that I have brought to my expeditions over the decades is about trying to find a balance within. And that's not something you sit down and for an hour each day and think, right, I'm going to find my balance within. Okay, you might do a daily meditation, and in a sense that is what you're doing. But really, that idea is something that is best achieved throughout your whole life, your very day to day. And trying to bring that calmness and clarity and honesty to that which you undertake on a daily basis, and then so then when you're out, when you head off on the expedition, that's what you're bringing. And in a sense, that's the best form of yourself. That's the best you're bringing to it. The honest, the calm, the thoughtful you. And so just trying to engender that into your day-to-day life as a constant. Now, it's easier said than done, and I'm not suggesting I'm very good at it. But in the world of adventure, something's born good results, and I do believe it's more the psychology than the physical. If you get the psychology right, the body will just follow. But if it's all about the body, if you haven't got the psychology right, the body will just collapse in a heap.
And I mean, just hearing what you're saying now, it sounds to be the opposite of ego, or the ego. It seems to be the opposite of being 100 meters from a peak, bad weather, and you still go for it because you want to get that prize. I mean, I imagine that decision making is a huge part of these explorations for you, because it's literally a matter of life and death, yeah?
Yes, yes, it is. Look, it is absolutely life and death, and again, unfortunately, I've witnessed an awful lot of death. And uh, when we retreated off mountains on expeditions or climbs that I was involved in, I was always the one to make the call that let's go down. Um, and often the people with me would go, yeah, let's do that. So you just get this situation where there's all this momentum going up and all this momentum going in a direction, whatever it might be. And I see that in the world as a whole now. But there's all this momentum to go up, and things are changing. Everything is changing all the time. And when you're high on a mountain in an extreme environment, pushing for the summit, then things can cloud one's judgment, and ego can be one of those. You've been working towards this expedition for a year, maybe more. You've put all this money into it, whatever it may be. There it is. There's the goal. We can get there, and people lose track of getting back, or what happens after that. And yeah, so they just get summit fever and go all out to the top when really they should be turning around and coming back down. And so it's that balance again, keeping things in perspective, and nobody's prepared to make what can be perceived as being the weak call. I actually think it's the strong call, but maybe I'm just putting myself up in describing it as such. But to retreat and survive. So, people haven't always agreed with me, and people who've gone up when me and others have come down have died. So, it's good to keep things in perspective.
Yeah. And from one extreme to another extreme, so we've been talking about summiting some of the world's highest peaks. The way I discovered your work was through your trek across Australia, which you've got the poster behind you, where you walked 2,500 kilometres unassisted, 128 days with your dog Seraphine. It was your fourth attempt, is my understanding. And it's just, for me, watching that journey is just a document of a person, a curious person, pushing himself to his limits. What was the idea behind this journey? What was your essence or motivation for that?
Yeah, well, it was a long time in the making, that one, and it is a bit of a long story. But look, I got into the climbing as we discussed, and I pushed myself to the best of my abilities in all spheres of climbing, both with teams and partners and alone. And I'd achieved a lot of my early objectives. And I'd lost a lot of friends. And climbing, the expeditions I'd been at it intensively for 15 years, it was losing some of the excitement that it had when I left school and I was a boy and everything was new and exciting, and a combination of things all came together, and I was looking for a new objective, and I looked at a few different possibilities. I was hoping to make a solo journey to the South Pole. Nobody had trekked overland to the South Pole alone at that time, and I needed a huge budget and trying to get the Prime Minister on board as patron, and there was all these obstacles, and I had to do these things that just weren't me, trying to get this multi-million-dollar project off the ground. And I just, in the end, I'd gotten even further away from that excitement of childhood and youth, and I thought there's got to be something closer to home, something simple, something that doesn't cost an arm and a leg. And I pulled out the map of Australia, and I thought there's got to be something in Australia. So I pulled out the map of Australia. I'd always thought Australia was flat and boring. Coming from a mountaineering background, there's no glaciated mountains in Australia, bit of great rock climbing, sure, but and the objective leapt out at me. At that time, it was the 1980s, and adventurers around the world, myself included, were attempting to do some of these classic global objectives in what's called an unsupported way, or just which is simply stripping it away, stripping it down to asking the question, what is the person capable of? So people were trekked to the South Pole and without skidoos or air resupplies by air or teams of huskies. What's the person capable of without machinery, without beasts of burden? And I've been a part of that in on the some of the climbing I've done, where we've stripped away a lot of what people had used before. But I just saw Australia and I thought, well, make the unsupported traverse of the continent. And I knew nobody had done it. Plenty of people have crossed Australia, driven across, ridden camels across, you name it. But they've all relied on energy sources other than themselves, beyond their own energy or what they've taken with them or what they've had dropped off along the way. So that's how that sparked. And I had no idea about surviving the desert, absolutely not an idea. But it just leapt out at me at the end of 1988. And I knew this was something huge. I started learning about desert travel and desert exploration and the Aboriginal experience of the desert and the European explorers, and I learned different things from all the reading I did, and I started getting out into Australia and learning the art of survival in Australia, particularly water and food. What was in that environment, it was edible, and also learning how to hunt and just honing this whole new set of skills, and it was exciting. It was really exciting again. I was a beginner. I had no idea what I was doing. And of course I started small, just with little forays, and those forays slowly got bigger. And I didn't tell anyone what my objective was. I had no idea whether such thing was even possible, to walk off-road, off-track, no resupplies, no beast of burden, just me, my own energy, and what I can gather from the natural environment. I attempted it 4 times, and even before my first attempt, I absolutely knew that this was going to be the most difficult thing I'd done, and I knew it would be more difficult than the polar treks and the mountain climbing and the solo rock climbing and all of that. It was just very, very challenging. Mm-hmm. But when I didn't even tell anyone what I was up to, people had no real idea what I was about. I filmed all 4 attempts. I'd been filming since 1984 on the west ridge of Everest, and I wanted to get some simple messages across to a wider audience, and some of those messages were just covered now in a more detailed way. But so that's why I filmed that.
And 4th attempt, my understanding it was your 3rd attempt before you reached the summit of Everest unassisted. You're obviously someone that likes a challenge and doesn't like not reaching their challenge. Is that a fair call?
No, look, I don't think that's quite right. I really like not reaching my challenge. Yeah, and so those I really like it. I prefer it than reaching it. Now, it's great when you finally achieve your objective, but there's also been others. There's been a number of others, and nobody's ever heard of them because I never completed them, where I've attempted things and attempted them again and again and again even, and still no joy, but lots of joy, in fact. Just because I didn't get the cherry on top, I had the whole cake to myself. And so, some things I go back and again and again. Other things I attempt once and think, I'll try something different. But there's been a few that I've attempted a number of times and never got them. And that's great. That's good. So it can seem that I'm very dogged in that way, and I am. But it's actually not necessarily about, sort of winning in the end at all costs. Some of the things that I attempted a number of times and never went back to, I felt I was in with a chance. It wasn't that I never went back because I gave up on them. I thought it was impossible or whatever. It was just that I moved on and, different things, whatever. Yeah, try something different. Yeah. Other things I was very dogged at. That's true. Yeah.
It's fascinating.
On my fourth attempt, I think I did actually in my journal write that this was going to be my last go. Now, as it turned out, I completed the journey on the fourth attempt. Would I have attempted it a fifth time if I hadn't? I don't know. I said that in my journal on a day. It was obviously a very challenging day, or it's in a very challenging part of the trip, which could have been virtually any of it. But who knows? Who knows?
It's totally fascinating. For people that are watching and listening, I'm going to put a link where people can watch your film, can get access to it, because I think that, well,
right.
It's interesting,
Yeah.
it's inspiring, it's unique. It really just shows the art of survival, but it also shows another thing, which I hope you don't mind me bringing up. And over your right shoulder is also your very beautiful dog, Seraphine, Jack Russell. Won't talk too much.
Queen of the desert.
Queen of the desert. What was it like to have the Queen of the desert with you as a companion?
Fantastic. It was great. It was great having Seraphine out there. I mean, I've made many journeys alone. I've made many journeys with partners. I've made many journeys as a member of a team, but I've never made a big journey with a non-human animal. And I've had this dog and Seraphine, and she, dogs love to go for a walk. And I was planning on going for a walk, and I asked her if she wanted to come for a walk, and she said yes. Yes, she did want to go for a walk. So we went for a walk, and she had a great time. And we did a few desert walks together, 3 in fact, and it was just a joy to travel with her. And dogs are they're a lot smarter than people, and so she was a great help to me out there. She was she actually helped me in very practical ways, again and again and again and again. And speaking of Seraphine, Suzy wrote this book, Seraphine, Terror of the Desert. It's actually from Seraphine's perspective. So I'm Big Dog, and it's based on all the stories that happened along the way, and it's a great look. It's supposedly a kid's book, sort of about 10-year-olds, but it brings most adults to tears when they read it, and adults will start reading. Oh, let's have a look at this, and many of them just can't put it down. So no, Seraphine. Seraphine was just total legend, and I just love travelling with her. You know how it is with your dog.
What did you learn from Seraphine?
I think dogs have an awful lot to teach us about life, and look, just generally, I think the creatures around us do teach us all sorts of things if we can tune into them and spend some time with them, or whatever creatures they may be. But the Seraphine, I guess her enthusiasm and her commitment to that journey really, and not that I was lacking in it, don't get me wrong, but it really cemented my own commitment. She'd get up in the morning and it was like, let's go, and it's like, yeah, let's go. So so I think it's not so much she taught me, but she just underlined my own. We were on the case together, really, and we underlined each other's strengths, I think, and so that there was that sort of mutual learning together about the fact that our course was sensible, which is to go for a walk. Yeah, to go for a walk. And at the end of the day, I think it's easy to lose sight of the fact in our current world that what we have evolved to walk across the landscape and find food, water, and shelter. That's been what we've done for the vast majority of human history. Walk across the landscape, and the natural landscape. and it's a healthy thing to do. It's a really healthy thing to do. It's what feeds us. It's what really feeds us. Feeds the soul. The nature becomes this incredible mirror that just is a reflection, or you can learn a lot just by observing what you see as you move across the wild spaces, and it's a great mirror to oneself, one's inner self, particularly when you're alone. But just get out there in the wild, get out on foot. Yeah, we don't do enough of it.
And I hear you talking about, this word alone. And I can't recall whether you say it in the film or in something I've read, but that you say that you felt extremely alone, but not lonely, perhaps. Curious as to this distinction between alone and lonely.
Yeah, look, I think there is a difference. I think lonely, at least to me, to my understanding of the words, lonely is sort of missing things. When a person describes themselves as lonely, it's like there's something missing in their world, in their life. Typically, it's other people, but not necessarily. So they're lonely. There is something missing. Now, when I, and it is in the documentary that I shot, Alone Across Australia, that line does come from. When I describe myself as alone but not lonely, there's nothing missing. I've got everything, and it in spades, and I'm totally whole in every way. But alone. So what I meant was, there's an intensity to being without other people, without things, another creature that you can really communicate with in a deep way. And I did have Seraphine, but I felt very much we were alone in that we couldn't talk to anything else. We were moving through the landscape, and the rest of the landscape was there. The ecosystems in which we travel were their own sort of self-contained units, and we were travelers passing through it. And we interacted with the landscape, absolutely, but we were sort of strangers to it. We were outsiders. We were our own unit, alone. And look, that sense of aloneness, especially when the weeks and months go by, brings this incredible growing intensity to it. Now you can sort of get a hint of that when you spend a few hours alone in nature and be quiet and just observe, walk, travel, ideally, but observe. But that intensity just deepens the further you go into it, and it gets to the point where it's almost like you're observing yourself from outside of yourself, doing these things, and the intensity builds. And there's many classic cases of solo adventurers and travelers kind of losing the plot, and some people say, but I'm a classic case of that. But I watch the film and judge for yourself. But I certainly felt that I was holding it all together, and was keeping the unit close.
It's incredible. One of the most, and if you don't mind, I'll just one more on this walk across Australia, and then there's a couple of other things I'd like to chat about. But the thing that I thought was most remarkable is that you were alone across Australia. You were really struggling at times. You were really struggling with physical fitness. You were really struggling for food, for water, and you came across a few people in the desert that were living really remotely. They first thought you're a lunatic or some crazy guy with a gun that was gonna get them, and they all said the same thing. They said that they offered you food and drink, But you didn't hang around and you didn't accept and you kept going. You must be just such a determined or steel-minded person that even in those depths of, and you were at times desperate, but you chose to be self-sustainable. Just wondering whether that was sort of for a record or some other reason, or whether that was just an internal decision and strength.
Yeah, look, I think for me, people have said that. How did you resist when you're offered a beer or something in that situation, or whatever was on offer? And it was actually really easy because I'd worked towards this and that was on my fourth attempt. So this had been 13 years I've been working towards this goal, and I was getting there. I was in with the chance, and my goal was to without resupply. Yeah, without just using my own energy. So if I had accepted food from these people, where I was getting food that wasn't from the natural environment that I hadn't carried with me. So it wasn't about a record, so to speak, because it's like nobody had done something like that before. It's sort of about adventure, and it was about for me personally about the purity of the adventure. I was going to, if I had accepted food from someone else, I was just diluting my experience, and that's the last thing I want to do when I'm on a big journey is dilute it and weaken it. So yeah, I was desperate at times, and hungry at long stretches of that trip. I lost a third of my body weight, and so it would, I guess it would have been easy to crack there, but if you'd been that way inclined, but I knew why I was out there. Again, it goes back to that mental preparation, and so I understood myself very well, and what I was doing, why I was there, and so it was easy to say no. Yeah, yeah.
Are you stronger than the rest of us? Is there or braver than the rest of us? Or what makes you able to do this and most other people wouldn't even begin to contemplate that was a good idea?
Well, I think I'm just an ordinary, simple bloke, and that followed his heart and his passion and his interests. With great passion, I guess. I like first-hand experience. I like real experience. I like meeting people for real. I like doing things with my hands and my body and also, I guess, not things that are handed to you on a plate, like a package holiday or something. I like the raw and the being in charge of all that. So, and it's extremely rewarding. So, and the more you push yourself in any sphere, the more rewarding it becomes. So I don't think that I'm, I think over the decades I've become certainly physically stronger and mentally sharper, and my understanding of myself has grown. I think that just happens with age. But when you put yourself in all these extreme situations, many of which are very dangerous, it does really sharpen that sense of self and that understanding of self. So when it comes to the challenge, the big challenges on a big expedition, then it's a sort of a no-brainer for me. I'm there to really push myself right to safely to the limit, and that's what it's about for me. That brings out the best in me, the best performance. But anybody who's follow that passion, follow that childhood. Everybody's got something, me included, that goes way back. That they always wanted to do. Always thought I'd like to do that. But it's getting off the couch. It's making that first step. That's the hardest step. And take it, do it. What is it? What is it that you've got? What is it that's at the back of your mind? Been at the back of your mind for ages. You just just bring it forward and grab the bull by the horns and see where it takes you. You won't be disappointed. You will be disappointed if you don't do it.
Awesome. I read that, talking about limits, I read that you had an experience with a 2-ton block of rock that hit you and cracked your ribs, and that perhaps you were actually dead for 3 minutes in this experience. And I have a quote, if you don't mind me reading it. "I instantly realized that I was dying and I couldn't breathe. I drifted out of my body and out into this golden light, and it was the most beautiful experience of my life."
Yeah, it was. Yeah, no, it was. It was really extraordinary. I do no pulse, no breathing for a guesstimated 3 minutes. They do say 3 minutes with no pulse and no breathing, people will start, the brain will start dying, and some have pointed back to that 10th of October 1981 when I was killed by that rock to explain me. But look, that's a wonderful, wonderful time of life, and it was pure magic out there. It was timeless, and I became completely formless during that 3 minutes. It seemed like an eternity. I was out there in this golden light, and I slowly became aware that I was just an awareness, that I had no shape or form or anything. I just seemed to become this awareness, and there was a strong sense of eternity out there too, that I was just drifting eternally. And then I got this little breath back in the bottom of this lung here, and just the body made this last attempt to restart itself, and it succeeded, which was very disappointing for me, because I was wrenched from this liminal space to back on this ledge I've got all these broken ribs and these punctured lungs, and breathing is even just really shallow in the bottom of this lung, because this lung's not working at all, was intensely painful. And I didn't want to be back in that body, and it gave me back where I was. It was much, much better. But anyway, it was what it was, and I'm glad it was, because I get to have a second death now. I just hope my second death's as good as the first one. I'll be very disappointed.
And do you know where you were in those 3 minutes? Was this a religious or a spiritual experience for you, or are you trying to explain it, or you're just letting it go to the things that can't be explained?
Yeah, look, I think it was a spiritual experience, no question about it. But as far as trying to explain it, just that. Just what I have explained was as far as I can go. I mean, I've read of other accounts of people who've had no pulse and no breathing for a while, like Kerry Packer, and he said, "There's nothing there, mate," quote unquote. So I guess everybody's experience of death, just like life, is quite different, and I think being open to all the possibilities of life and death probably might help gain a richer experience. Yeah.
I thought you may be revealing the whole mystery of the universe, and the fact that you died, gone somewhere, come back, and all the mysteries had been revealed for you, and you can tell us what this world's all about, and what this life is all about, and what consciousness is, and explain it all. But it sounds like you're perhaps, like the rest of us, none the wiser.
Well, I don't know. I mean, this happened when I was 20, and it really cemented my path to me. It was almost like putting an exclamation mark and underlining my path, saying, that's it, John, do it. You're on the right track. You've got to make the most of this life. Yeah, yeah. Sure, that golden light was wonderful, but being this alive, being this active, conscious, physical being, it's just extraordinary, and we lose sight of that. Children are filled with wonder, and it just slowly drains out of them. I guess I started climbing, and people say to me, "When did you start climbing?" And I say, "Well, I never stopped climbing," and that's because all children climb. All the baby tries to. The 6-month-old, year-old tries to climb up onto the couch. They climb. Children climb. You look, all children climb, and then they stop climbing. Around 12, 15, they stop climbing. And the one that sort of slowly goes out of them, well, I never stopped climbing. So I went from climbing all those other stuff that all those other children climb. They're climbing rocks and climbing mountains. And so I never stopped. And so I guess, I think one of the lessons of my death is simply that, just to make the most of life, just to see the wonder around you in the small and the large and the stuff you can't even see, and try and see it with fresh eyes.
So much wisdom in all of these words. It's a beautiful conversation, I feel, that we're having, and I thank you for all these amazing insights. It brings us now to your life now, which we were trying to have this chat last week, but you rely on, my understanding is you rely on the sun for solar power to give you electricity, which allows you even to turn the computer on. So I can't say I've ever had to wait for the sun to have a chat for this podcast. It's a pretty amazing thing. So I wonder if you can just explain your life now.
Yes, well, as I said before, I mean, one's previous experience leads one on the journey of life, and so all those experiences on adventures with the simplification of things and seeing those Himalayan tribes and villages, and made me think I've just got to try and simplify things as much as I can and take more responsibility for my needs. And so I've been doing that for the last 30 years in the home environment. And Suzy and I have lived here at Inanna for 20 years, where we've really been able to be creative in our world. And when I say world, I mean the world immediately around us. And so we're not on mains water or mains power, and we really like it like that. So we take responsibility for that. So it's all solar, and it's winter now, so it has been quite cloudy, and we've got to wait for a sunny day to have a long, be connected. It's amazing how much power the modem uses. We've been surprised. I thought it would have been a low power user, but it's actually a high power user. So we've had to wait for this, and the solar panels also pump water out of our bore, and we've got guttering on all of our sheds, and that collects all the rainwater, goes into our water hole, fishing water hole, got bees, massive vegetable garden, and massive orchard, and massive empire of chickens as well. And also I go out every evening meditating, just for a bit of quiet John time. There's a bit of a difference with my meditation in that I meditate with a loaded gun across my knees, and every now and again my meditation ends with a bang. I target ferals, just rabbits in fact. And so we eat a fair bit of rabbit too when they disturb my meditation. So we try and provide the majority of our needs. We also fix things and make things, and it's what we all should be doing, really. But so we've been focusing on that for 20 years, and slowly but surely reducing the inputs from outside of here. Yes,
it's incredible. I mean, we're only a few hours away by drive. I'm in Melbourne. I'm in stage 4 lockdown. I have no balcony. I have 2 windows that open 5 centimetres, and this is my experience of COVID lockdown. And obviously you're either not impacted at all or impacted in a very different way. Without getting deep into this COVID issue and political, what do you see as, this response, which is like keeping people inside, keeping people at home? We're not actually even allowed to be outside. Do you have a thought on this?
Yeah, look, you're right. It hasn't impacted me a lot, but it's impacted everybody to a certain extent, and it's certainly impacted us, but not as intensely as somebody living in the city or like yourself. Um, I just think you look at that Spanish flu and what happened there. I think the powers that be are doing the best they can to try and prevent such a situation occurring again. And, the lockdowns seem to be quite effective, so as difficult as they can be. Um, but, I think in a broader sense, I am concerned that we're not learning lessons. We're not learning lessons from the past, and here's a great opportunity for some contemplation on the trajectory of humanity in these lockdowns. I mean, and globally, and it's not hard to see that we're sort of off course collectively. And I mean, you look at anything and everything around. Elephants, in my lifetime, the population wild elephants have decreased 95%. They say they'll be extinct by the end of this century. I mean, I'm not talking about elephants. They're just, emblematic of really what I'm on about. But and so, in a sense, I wonder whether the coronavirus is really trying to teach us something about ourselves and about our trajectory. And we have the sense that we'll invent this vaccine and all will be well. But I think I said at the start of this talk, we're in plague proportions. And you look at other plagues, a creature that is out of balance with the world around it, a plague. And what happens to plagues is conditions are good for that particular creature at that given time. I mean, insects are the classic ones that get in plague proportions, like locusts, but lots of creatures over time have become in plague proportions. And you make hay while the sun shines, and you go for it. You breed up your population, and then something comes along and the population just crashes. It could be that they typically, say with locusts, they eat up all their resource or whatever. So I'm sort of hoping that this COVID thing, and I see some signs of hope, but it's going to make people think about what's really important, not just in their own lives, but for the future, for the future of life on Earth. So I'm hoping it's a real blessing in disguise. And I also think that we're so used to just looking elsewhere for everything. Yeah, I want to be entertained. I'll go there. I want to do this. And outsourcing everything, and including the most important things in our lives. So I'm wondering whether the lockdowns are. I'm sure it's the case that some people are having an internal journey. I mean, everybody always is, but I'm wondering whether it might actually be a clear and positive internal journey, and then they explore things internally that they'd forgotten existed, and that may in fact be beneficial to them, and come out of this with a new insight into both themselves and the world around them.
I hope so, absolutely too.
I'm optimistic.
Yeah, you are. I mean, is that true? Are you a pure optimist?
No, I'm a realistic optimist. I'm a realistic optimist. So, the reality will temper that optimism. I'm a very optimistic person, but when I look to the future of life on Earth, I have grave concerns.
where you're doing amazing things. What I love so much about what you're doing, and you mentioned sort of the way that you're documenting and filmmaking your journeys, and I'm a filmmaker as well, and trying in my very humble way to, make people aware of issues, of different things around the world. How does storytelling play a part in your life? Is this something that just happened as a result from the adventures and the exploration, or deep down, are you actually a storyteller?
Well, I don't know. I think that's a good one. I was an incredibly shy child, like painfully shy. And so I certainly, in my early childhood, was certainly not a storyteller. But then we had this situation where we were going to, as a family, be seeing a lot of other family members. We went to Scotland and England, where the family's from, and meet lots of cousins and uncles. And I made a conscious decision that I was going to try and overcome this shyness and talk more to people. And I managed to do that. I managed to, and it was challenging. It was a hard thing to do, because I think that is the real me. It's actually a bit of a recluse, a bit shy. I was happy in my own little sort of corner, doing my own little thing. And then that's part of the reason why I've done a lot of those solo adventures. But you do a lot of it, and you become more experienced, and people want to hear stories about it. And then you start leading expeditions, and you really need to start telling stories and to get people on side when you're leading an expedition, or to entertain them. And so it just starts happening. And I do give public lectures, a keynote speaker, and that sort of thing as well. So, but I don't do a lot of that. I do get a lot of reward from it, because people seem to benefit from the story, and I think it is beneficial in the broader sense as well, to highlight another way of seeing and being that I feel there isn't enough of in this world. Everybody's too focused on what the latest rock star or film star or somebody they've never even met and never will meet is doing. And when I see that the path most people are traveling, that's where I was saying a realistic optimism, or that sort of brings a bit of pessimism into me when I see what people think is important in their world, and it's so far from the reality of their true needs. So telling these stories, I guess, is also a way of and making the documentaries or whatever it may be has been a way of reaching a wider audience, just with a slightly different or a bit radically different take on the world and our place in it.
This sentence, I haven't heard it articulated like that before. I love it. Another way of seeing and being. And in lots of ways, that's what I'm trying to do with this podcast, have deep discussions with people who are looking at other ways of seeing and being. And it's an amazing opportunity. You're now living there as well with your wife Suzy, and you've made this film together. You found a partner for your adventures as well.
Yeah, that's right. Suzy and I have been on quite a few adventures together, apart from the adventure of Anana, which is the name of our property here. We've been out ocean sailing and in a small yacht from Fiji to Newcastle, and sea kayaking. We made a 4-month hunting and gathering sea kayaking journey, and we've been out to the desert many times. And yeah, there's been lots of adventures, but the biggest one has been, I think, is been creating this world, this small world around us right here.
It's amazing. When I was writing to Suzy to arrange this discussion, after watching that film, I wrote to her and said it was an amazing film, but even more than that, it actually was an amazing love story. And thank you to you both for giving an insight into this. You're both very beautiful people, and I thank you for that. What I would love to ask you is, you've still got your whole life ahead of you, but there is going to be a stage when you head off into the golden sunlight or wherever you were for those 3 minutes. What would be the way that you would most want to be remembered? What would you like your legacy on this earth to be?
Well, I'd rather be forgotten. Yeah, I'd rather people sort of focused on their children's future and the life of the creatures around them. I'd rather people kind of focused on that and put their energy there rather than trying to remember some old geezer who died last week or last year or whenever it was. Who was he anyway? He sounds like a complete weirdo. So, I think I'd rather people focus on enhancing the life force of the planet, and particularly the life energy around them, than remembering me. So, yeah, I'd rather be forgotten.
Well,
yeah.
I got news for you. I'm not going to forget you, and there's a whole lot of people on this planet who've been touched by you. So, humility is a very beautiful thing that I feel through this internet connection and these screens. And it's a very interesting thing for me. I do hope that one day I get the opportunity to disturb you on your property and your gazillion chickens, and I'd love to see and experience your life with my own eyes. Thank you so much for taking the time and for allowing us to go a little bit into what makes you tick. It's been the biggest pleasure. Thank you, my friend.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, thank you. Like I said, it's good that people like yourself are able to get this stuff from different angles and different views that people can tune into, and perhaps in its small way create a better future for life on Earth.
Champion. Thank you very much. See you, John.
Thank you. Thank you. Ciao.
Ciao. Many thanks for watching. I'd love for you to be notified of new episodes, so subscribe and hit the bell button below. Like and share this video, and feel free to leave any comments or questions below. You can also visit liminalspace.earth to discover all episodes. But for now, many thanks again, and I'll see you next time in a liminal space.